Good afternoon, and welcome to The Road to Recovery, The Road to Freedom with Mark. This is my 28-minute show every week, and of course I wasn't on last week because of Easter. I hope you had a good Easter break, and I hope you managed to attend the Anzac services this year. It was very sad to see that some of those things were cancelled, and it is a terrible situation where people don't feel safe in their own country because of what's going on around the world. And, I heard on the news the other day some guy said this is the new normal, and I certainly hope it's not the case. It is a very, very sad thing what happened on that Friday in March, and I think the whole country's in shock. And, the longer you live, the more likely it is that something traumatic will happen in your life. And that's what my show is all about, really talking about mental health issues. And I believe that virtually everybody at some stage in their life will suffer from some mental illness, from some extreme stress and trauma, even if it's just the death of your loved ones. Even when it's expected, it can truly rock your world in a way you never expected. It can blindside you. The breakup of a long-term relationship can be a devastating thing for people, and some people even commit suicide because of things like that. They feel such tremendous loss, they don't feel like they can get over it. The most important thing is talking. If you feel like you're trapped, like there is no escape, no way out, and often you get that way, you get into that rut and you cannot see at all. You can't see any light. There is only darkness, and you just seem trapped and there's no way out. That's where friends come in. True, good, real friends. And they, boy, are they hard to find. But if you have any at all, then those are the people to talk to. And if you cannot manage to do that, the most important port of call of all really is your doctor. And you can get to a doctor. From there, they can at least assess your situation. You can verbalise what you're feeling and get it off your chest. And if you need a psychiatrist or whatever, that can be very, very helpful. Some drugs too, although I'm not a big fan of taking drugs. But in extreme cases, when you get extremely stressed, you find you can't sleep. And once insomnia sets in, it really starts knocking you around, and your ability to think clearly is compromised. So, getting yourself back on track, getting some form of regularity, a little bit of exercise, getting out, clearing your mind, distracting yourself, and focusing on small and important things is often extremely helpful. But most important of all, talk to people, because often two heads are better than one. Often a friend can help you find a solution that you hadn't necessarily thought about. And that can be the key sometimes to your freedom. And that's what the road to freedom is all about, is finding a solution, finding a way through from the terrible things that do happen in your life. No one ever said this was going to be a rose garden, and life simply is not that way. In the ideal, perfect world, maybe, but this is reality, and dealing with it is the most important thing. Procrastinating is very easy. Put it off, tough it out. But in the end, that is all self-destructive. And the most important thing is getting help. So if you know anyone suffering from mental health, or more importantly, if you can be there just to listen, not necessarily to find solutions, but most importantly to listen. That's what friendship's truly all about. Well, time's ticking on. We better get on with today's show. Because of Anzac Day, in commemoration, I am doing Gallipoli in Istanbul today. I was about probably 22, 23 when I went to Gallipoli. It was a long time ago, some 30 years, but it left an indelible impression. Here's why. This is called Gallipoli in Istanbul. My good friend Wayne and I had hitchhiked our way around the Aegean coast from Greece to Turkey. We first headed down to the small town of Konakli, which is near the beach we refer to as Gallipoli. We met up with a guy called David who ran his home as a hostel for travellers, especially Kiwis and Aussies. David was a fantastic host and arranged a cheap taxi over the hill to where the great battle for Chunuk Bair had occurred. Wayne and I didn't know what to expect, so we were amazed to find the place left pretty much unchanged from those terrible days when so many young men had perished. There was a small museum temporarily manned by an old geezer, some well-tended graves at the top of the hill, and a large stone plaque from the term of President Ataturk. In the most respectful terms, it is written there for all to see. Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives. You are now lying in the soil of a friendly country, therefore rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and the Merkmets to us, where they lay side by side here in this country of ours. You, the mothers, who sent their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. After having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons as well. Ataturk, 1934. Apart from this plaque, the graves and museum, very little had changed from those terrible days when the abortive landings had taken place. Down on the beach there were thousands of corroded shell casings and bullets lying everywhere. Many of these have been taken as souvenirs by tourists and are quickly disappearing as a result. Up from the beach was an area called the Pines, where many Australian boys had been slaughtered both by friendly fire and the fierce resistance the Turks had showed. At the time, a simple unsealed road led up to the hills of Chunuk Bair, where the Indians and Kiwis had been decimated. There were open trenches all over the place. Undisturbed from the time those poor boys had fallen, the trenches were full of skulls, leg and arm bones protruding from the earth. As the land grew steeper, the number of bones increased and tears flowed freely as I touched them gently. Despite the incredibly steep and exposed terrain, the Kiwis managed to force the Turks off the tops, were forced back, then took it a second time, only to be hurled off a second time, before a truce being declared. I did not believe in ghosts until that day, but the eerie emptiness of this open graveyard moved me as never before. After spending the best part of a day at Gallipoli, we headed back for tea at Konakli, where through David I met up with one of the last Turkish survivors of the campaign. He heaped praise on his old enemies for their fierceness and tenacity, especially the Kiwis. He told me of the extreme hardships they all had to endure, freezing winter and blistering summer, and trenches so close they could hear each other talking. It was quite overwhelming to hear of his hardships, and humbling to hear the great respect he held for his old enemy. After a very pleasant and moving stay at Konakli, we headed back up the peninsula and eastward on to Istanbul. This magnificent city on the Golden Horn is split in half by the Bosphorus Strait. On one side lies the new part of the city, with its high rises and western trappings like McDonald's. Fittingly enough, it is on the Western Bank and emphasises Turkey's wish to join the European Union. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of a break now. Yeah, I think we're halfway through. I'd like to play you a little track. This is by one of my favourite artists. I guess I have many, but this is a particularly beautiful song by the great Nina Simone. I hope you enjoy it.
Gold ring on his finger he wore. It was where everyone could see he belonged to someone, but not me. On his hand was a plain gold band. Plain gold ring had a story to tell. It was one that I knew too well. In my heart, it will never be spring, long as he wears a plain gold ring. When nighttime comes a calling on me, I know why I will never be free. I can't stop these teardrops of mine. I'm gonna love him till the end of time. Plain gold ring has but one thing to say. I'll remember till my dying day. In my heart, it will never be spring, long as you wears plain gold ring. Plain gold ring on his finger he wore. Plain gold ring on his finger he wore. Plain gold ring on his finger.
Welcome back to the Road to Recovery, the Road to Freedom with Mark. I'd just like to say a little thank you before I kick off again, just to thank all the sponsors of our show. Thank you very much for getting them behind the radio station, and to the listeners, I hope you appreciate all the great work that they do. Thank you, Wairarapa TV, for coming on board and making all this happen. But most importantly of all, Thank you to Michael and Veronica, who have supported me for many years, and all of us here who do these shows. I don't get paid to do this. I do this, it actually costs me, but I do this because this is my opportunity to pay the community back in some small way for all the wonderful things that I am given. I am very well looked after in this country, and we really do care for each other. And never is that more true than in Michael and Veronica. They do their jobs because they're passionate, because they care about what they're doing, and they are trying to make a difference. And I find that very encouraging, and that's why I do what I do. And for your part, I would like you to spread the good word about what Michael and Veronica and all the rest of us are trying to achieve here, which is to be here for you, our community. And we are trying to draw the community close together. You know, the Wairarapa, or this whole region, is just a magnificent place to live, and more people are cottoning onto it. We've seen first Martinborough and Greytown go kaboom, and since then Carterton has just smashed it, and Masterton too. Houses are flying up everywhere. It's just unbelievable. I have never seen growth like this in 50 years. And even Fairley is starting to hit its straps now. And I just think it's a great thing. This is a wonderful place to live. The people are really nice. The communities are good. Still relatively small, not too bad as far as traffic goes. The weather is fantastic, and there are so many beautiful things out there to see and to do. So anyone you know who's feeling down and suffering from mental health issues, encourage them to, you know, go for a walk down the Ruamhanga and all those wonderful rivers we've got. If you can, get out to places like Castle Point. You know, go for a walk on the beach. Boy, does it, you know, clean the soul. It really does. It's so beautiful out there. We are blessed with such a good community and such a wonderful place to live. So get out there and enjoy, and especially people suffering from mental illness. If you can take them out for a ride out to Castle Point and a walk on the beach, it could just, you know, turn them around. So, you know, make the effort. That's what I encourage you to do. Make the effort. Right, let's crack on with today's story. Don't want to be late. Right, this is Gallipoli in Istanbul. The Eastern Bank, however, is the Byzantium and Constantinople of old. It still retains some of the Topkapi Palace walls from the Ottomans. Also the magnificent St. Sophia Byzantium period church. Erected at the height of the Byzantium period, it boasted the largest dome of any church for over 1,000 years. Below St. Sophia's, towards the banks, the dilapidated old buildings lean on each other like drunks. We stayed on the rooftop of one of these dodgy old places, directly below the Blue Mosque, which sits in magnificence further up the hill. I walked from our dodgy lodgings to St. Sophia's and spent a few hours in its pleasant cool on a blistering hot day. From there I walked up to a quadrant outside the incredible Blue Mosque. With its 6 gigantic minarets, its overall size is hard to take in. Entering the Blue Mosque, having first washed hands and feet in the cool water and covering from wrist to ankle, is a religious experience in itself. The eye is drawn to the heavens by the untold thousands of beautiful handmade turquoise tiles, the bright light of God, their epicentre. It was impossible to take it all in with one glance. I found myself bowing my head naturally in order to take in the magnificence of this labour of love. The sheer scale only added to the potency of its message. The peace and serenity of this cool sanctuary was most welcome on a hot afternoon. Outside the quadrant, which houses one of the 4 Cleopatra's needles taken from Egypt during the height of empire. The others are located on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, the Embankment on the Thames in London, and the Washington Monument in the United States. Strange how the symbols of old power are reused by the next great power. These so-called needles are huge obelisks of stone, tapering from bottom to top and finished to a point at the top. Beautiful and huge in their own right, they are symbols of ancient power, which are enhanced by their new surroundings, especially in Istanbul. At night there was a sound and light show outside the Blue Mosque, which lit it up like a castle from ancient times. This spectacular show transported the crowd back in time to a time when great sultans ruled over this magnificent city and brought light and civilization into an otherwise dark world. The mighty Ottoman Empire slowly ground to a halt, finally collapsing at the hands of the invading Nazis during World War II. After the show, I headed back to our accommodation and got off to sleep with the help of a local hooch called Raki. At first light in the morning, calling to prayer broke out across the old city via speakers on the minarets of the mosques. Haunting and beautiful, it is an experience that stays with you for a lifetime. In the cool air and beautiful light of the morning, I walked up the hill to the Topkapi Museum. Housed in the ruins of the old castle, it houses many priceless works of art and precious gems. Amongst these are the Topkapi diamond, a huge beautiful stone that defies belief. Not as large as the Cullen diamonds used in the British crown jewels, it nonetheless has an otherworldly clarity to it. It refracts the light so well it almost seems liquid. Also housed there are emeralds the size of dinner plates. Just a tiny fraction of the Sultan's treasures remain. Yet what remains is such a beautiful and impressive collection it only sparks the imagination. There is also a collection of Ming Dynasty pottery, so huge that the senses begin to blur on looking at it. Reminiscent of the tales of the Arabian Nights, I could easily imagine a great castle on the hill, full of great piles of treasure. By the very nature of the development of the city, it is impossible to rebuild what has fallen into disrepair. The ruins, however, only enhance the beauty and mystique of the old city. I left Topkapi Palace in the heat of the afternoon and headed down a street called Divan Yol seeking shade. I came across a smoking cafe where the locals in their traditional loose clothes sat to while away a hot afternoon. The idea of this cafe was that you purchase a huge stub of tobacco for 100 or so lira. You are then waited upon by waiters who carry around hot coals on a plate. These are placed on the stub and put in a huge water pipe. The beautiful hookah pipes, as they are called, have a number of hoses and mouthpieces coming from them, so the experience can be shared amongst friends. They also serve hot sweet tea, called simply chai. It comes with no milk, instead they serve water with the tea. The cafe itself is an open courtyard protected from the sun by high walls. The tables, chairs and floors are solid granite and it is refreshingly cool. Old men sit around with friends, chatting and puffing on their pipes. As I watch them, I am transcended in time and imagine the same scene, having played out for centuries. Even sitting on my own, smoking and watching was an extremely pleasant way to spend an afternoon. Despite the language barrier, I felt quite accepted. The combination of tea and good tobacco was quite intoxicating. I waited until the burning sun had stooped quite low before wandering down some narrow cobblestone streets. Old men sat on stools at short tables, drinking tea and playing backgammon. Since I had already played the game, I asked an old guy for a game. The language barrier can be overcome with hand signals and a few words. Before long, I was being thrashed, but I stuck with it until I could hold my own at the breakneck speed. Backgammon is like a national pastime for men, and we played many enjoyable games, some of which I won. We played well into dark that night, and I felt like I had travelled in time, as this time-honoured tradition played itself out. With my first real lesson in backgammon, I headed back down the hill to my rooftop bed. It was only possible to sleep during the small hours. Over the next few days, Wayne and I moved to cheaper accommodation, which required a cheap bus ride just out from the old city centre. We visited other great mosques like Solomon the Magnificent's around the Golden Horn. We also went to local markets with their exotic food and spices. The Turks are natural salesmen and always drive a hard bargain. Centuries of trading on the Silk Route seems to have honed their skills, making trading with them great fun. Despite the obvious poverty, the city vibrantly bustles with trade. Handmade carpets are a favourite item with the Turks, and they go to great lengths to sell these works of art. The hot summer days of visiting mosques and markets, of smoking hookah pipes and nights of backgammon passed too quickly. Soon we were off south, down the coast, but the indelible impression of Istanbul stayed with us for the rest of our lives. The end. Well, looky there. My time is up. So I've just got to say a quick thank you to T.G. McCarthy Trust New Zealand on the Wairarapa TV, and especially to Veronica and Michael. Thank you very much, and we will see you again next week. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to have a new story for you next week, The Night Porter. I know you're going to like it. Catch you next week. Bye for now.